How to make an easy and efficient mob farm in Minecraft. These are the resources you will need for this farm. So anyways, let's get into it. Alright, so the first step to this farm is of course to find yourself somewhere to build this farm. Now you can build this farm pretty much anywhere as long as it's not above a mushroom island. However, I would recommend building it above an ocean, as this will guarantee that you will not have to spawn proof any areas, which again will then of course make the farm a lot easier to build, and it will make the spawn rates in the farm a lot better. So anyways, to build this I would recommend you go out to the ocean and then build it up in the sky. Now if you're playing on sim distance 4 as in the standard version, you will have to build yourself up in the air at least around 60 blocks. However, if you're playing on sim distance 6 or higher, you will have to build yourself up at least 128 blocks. Now if you don't know what sim distance is, you're probably playing on 4. However, to check this you can simply press escape, settings, and then under game scroll down and you will see simulation distance right here, which is set to 4 chunks for me. This means that I will simply have to build up a minimum of 60 blocks up in the air. However, if the number is set to 6 or higher, you will have to build yourself up at least 128 blocks. Now I'm gonna build myself up 100 blocks just to make sure that everything is 100% good. However, again, if you're playing on sim distance 4, building yourself up around 50 or 60 blocks will be enough. Alright guys, so as you can see, I have built myself up 100 blocks. However, again, if you're playing on sim distance 4, building yourself up 50 or 60 blocks is enough. But I always like to build myself up a little bit higher just to make sure that everything is 100% good to go. So anyways, once you build yourself up here, you will now need to build yourself a small platform that you will place yourself your collecting system. So anyways, what you will have to do is just place yourself a block to your right and then 2 blocks going forward like this. Now we have a 2x2 platform. Then in front of this 2x2 platform, place yourself out a double chest with then 2 hoppers going into the double chest from the top. Then get yourself on top of these hoppers and place yourself 2 more hoppers going into these hoppers from the back. So anyways, once you've done this, what you will have to do now is surround these hoppers using solid blocks. So anyways, now you will have to get started on the trident killer. So anyways, to build a trident killer, simply place yourself a piston right above the top right hopper, looking towards of course the block that will then be on top of the hopper, pretty much like this. Then place yourself a redstone torch to right of the piston. Then while looking at the redstone torch you just placed, place yourself an observer, and now the little redstone eye should kind of be looking the same way the piston is, and the same with this arrow, and of course the little face right here should be looking towards where you have the redstone torch. Then head back here, rotate yourself to the left and place yourself a piston right here, so pretty much a piston in front of this little redstone eye. Then continue the step you did earlier, so place yourself a redstone torch on top of this piston. Then while looking at this redstone torch, place yourself an observer, do the same, rotate yourself to the left, another piston, redstone torch, observer, piston, redstone torch, and then finally an observer. Then you can head back out here, build these blocks up a little bit, and you can obviously build this a little bit more out, that way you have a bit more space to stand on. And if you want to have a ladder going up right here, you can simply destroy this block and then have, for example, ladders going up right here. So anyways, what you will have to do now to make sure this trident killer works is that you will have to place yourself a lever on top of this piston, flick this on, and what should happen now is that the pistons should kind of go around once, then flick this off I guess, and then now the pistons should be going around constantly, pretty much like this. But you can of course turn this off while building the farm. Then anyways, what you will have to do now is build yourself a big wall all around this trident killer, that way the mobs that will be spawning in the farm will fall down, lose most of their health, and then be killed relatively easy within the trident killer. So anyways, what you will have to do is pretty much place yourself a block on top of each of these pistons and observers, pretty much like this, and then build this 20 blocks going upwards. So this pretty much means that from what I built so far, I need to build this 19 more blocks going upwards. And you can build this out of pretty much any kind of block, so dirt, grass, stone, smooth stone, glass, whatever, you can build it out of any block. Or you can of course use a mix of them, so if I want to use glass in front, which I like to do, that way I can watch the mobs spawn and die, you can of course do that on the front and then build solid blocks all around the rest of this tower. So what blocks you decide to use right here is fully up to you. So anyways, as I've added some glass in front right here, what I'll need to do now is simply build myself 20 blocks up from each of these pistons and of course observers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
A few moments later.
Alright, so once you've done this, you should now have a big tower like this that's 20 blocks tall, going above all of the pistons and of course observers. So anyways, once you've done this, what you will have to do now is head to the top right here and then get started on the spawning platforms. So firstly, we will have to build ourselves a way of collecting the mobs using water streams. So to do that, we're going to head on top of all of these blocks and then build ourselves 7 blocks going outwards in each direction. So what I'm going to do is stand right here and then build myself 7 blocks going out from these 2 blocks this way. Stand on top of here and then build yourself 7 blocks going outwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do the same on of course the other side and then these other sides too. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then do the same on the rest of the sides. Alright, so once I've built these 7 blocks out, you should now have a total of 8 blocks going outwards, if you of course include this top block right here. So anyways, what you will have to do now is build yourself a 2 block high wall going all around these pillar things you've built going outwards. So to do that, you can place yourself a temporary block in the corner right here, place 1 block going up from the temporary block, destroy the temporary block, and then simply build yourself a wall of blocks going all around this platform, pretty much like this. And the wall you're building all around here will of course have to wrap around all these block pillar things going outwards. So anyways, once I build this one block tall, simply expand this by one more block going upwards. Alright, so once you have done this, what you can do now is add yourself in your water streams. So what you will have to do is add yourself 2 water buckets at the end of each of these rooms, and this water should flow pretty much straight until this corner right here, but it should not flow over into this room. Then just simply do this on all of the sides, pretty much like this. And boom, once you've done that, all the water will now be flowing towards the middle, however none will go into the middle, and you have now made your mob transportation system. So anyways, now we will have to get started on the actual spawning platforms. So to do that, you will have to go to one of these sides, and then pretty much where you place the water, you will have to build yourself 7 blocks going outwards from this block right here, kind of going the same way you have another pillar thing going outwards. So from the block right here, build yourself 7 more going outwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you should be able to link this up with this side at the same place, pretty much like this. So now these 2 pillars should be linked up where you pretty much place the water that are then flowing towards the middle, and you will of course have to fill in this little outline you just built. And boom, once you fill in that outline, you should now have something that looks like this. So anyways, you will now have to do the same thing on all of the other sides too. Alright, so once you've done that, you should have something that looks like this, and you will now have built the spawning platforms. So anyways, what we're gonna do now before continuing the walls is obviously find yourself a way to get the mobs that will be spawning on this platform to jump into the water, which will then of course push them towards the trident killer. Now the mobs would normally not jump off right here unless they accidentally fell, so we're gonna use a little trick to make them think there is a solid block right there that they are then gonna walk on top of, but instead of walking on top of an actual block, they're simply gonna fall into the water and then be pushed towards the trident killer. Now there's a couple of ways of doing exactly that, however I'm going to show you the 2 best ways. Now the main way people do this is by adding yourself a trapdoor to the top right here and then closing them, because mobs will see this trapdoor right here, which is of course closed, this one, as kind of an open one like this one, so they will walk out thinking this trapdoor is also open like this one, but instead of obviously walking out to the trapdoor, they will then fall into the water and push down here. The only problem with this method is that sometimes the mobs will walk all the way out here, stand still, not fall down, and then they will walk back, which can obviously reduce the rates by a little bit within this farm. So what I would recommend you do instead of using trapdoors is using coral fans. And you can use any kind of coral fans, just make sure the coral fans and not normal coral. So what you can do instead is place yourself any kind of coral on top of these blocks instead of the trapdoors, of course, because mobs will see a coral as a full block. However, the coral does not have any form of block you can stand on, which means that you will instantly fall into the water. And this is of course why I would recommend you use corals instead. However, using trapdoors are still fine, that is fully up to you. So anyways, what we will have to do now is do the same thing we did right here with the coral on these 3 other areas, but of course you can choose if you want to use coral fans or of course trapdoors. Alright, so once you've done that, you should now have something that looks like this. And now that you've done that, you now have a complete way of getting the mobs from the spawning platforms to fall into this water, and of course that will then transport them into the trident killer. So anyways, what you will have to do now is obviously build yourself a wall going all around the farm. So to do that, you can head on top of the blocks we have right here, then simply build yourself a wall going all around there, and this wall should of course be 2 blocks tall. Alright, so once you've done this, simply expand this by 1 more block going upwards, and boom, once you've done that, we just have 1 more step to this farm, well kind of 2, but the main one is of course to build yourself a roof above this farm, that way mobs can spawn even when we have the sun out. So to do that, head into one of the corners, place yourself a temporary block going upwards, build 1 block going outwards, destroy the temporary block, and then simply just build yourself a wall covering this entire farm pretty much right here. Alright, so once I built a roof, what you can do now is quickly break yourself into the farm, cover up the hole you broke, and now we have a little bit of light left, but boom, now that we have finished the roof, this room should be completely dark as you can see. And now the farm is almost ready to be used, however we have 2 more steps to do. One of them is to head out of here, go down towards the trident killer, and obviously throw yourself a trident on top of one of these pistons, pretty much like that. And then the next step is of course to make sure that mobs will not spawn on top of this roof, so what you will have to do is head yourself to the top of this farm and then simply place yourself some torches covering this roof. Alright, so as you can see, the roof is now pretty well lit up, so what you can do is simply head back down here, obviously make sure to light up this area right here, that way you don't get killed while you're standing AFK. And now the farm is pretty much ready to be used, so all you really have to do now is simply flick this lever to turn on the farm. The trident will be moved around, hurting the mobs that will be spawning and falling into this room. But of course, to say the chest might be a bit hard to reach, as you can see it is right here, so what you would have to do is just build yourself another platform right under here, that will make it easier to reach the chest. And you can of course just add yourself some more ladders right here, that way it's easier to get between the, for example, trident killer and of course the collecting system. And to briefly say, this farm is very powerful and pretty good, so I would recommend you have way more than just 1 chest. So you can very easily add more by adding another chest under there, with then for example hoppers going into that chest. And if you want to expand this system even more, what you can do is simply just keep adding chests going downwards right here, with then of course more hoppers going into those chests, pretty much like this. So yeah, as you can see, while we were building that, mobs have spawned within the farms. What you can do now is just simply flick on this lever, the mobs will start to die, and of course our items will head into the bottom chest right here. However, before we end off, there are a couple important things to know. If you want want to increase the rates within this farm by a lot. Hold a sword that has looting 3 on it, which you can see my sword has, and then flick the trident killer on while holding that sword. And if you do that, the looting effect that's on the sword will kind of be transported over to the trident killer. And as you can see, we have some XP within the farm, so what you can do is just stand close to these pistons, and then of course you will collect XP. Now another important thing to know about spawning mechanics within a farm like this, as you can see, not many mobs are spawning while I'm just standing right here. That is because mobs will only really spawn in a sapphire going 22 blocks away from you. And this means that since I'm standing right here, we have around 23-24 blocks going up from the farm, meaning quite a few mobs should spawn. However, they won't spawn everywhere within the farm. So what I would recommend you do to optimize the farm as much as possible is to simply go a couple blocks under the farm, so maybe around here, so where you have the bottom chests for example, and then just stand down here when you're standing AFK, as that will increase the spawn rates by a bit. Just make sure you're at least 24 blocks away from the main spawning platforms. So with this farm you can just stand back, stand AFK while doing whatever. Maybe you're going to school, work, whatever. You can stand AFK here, make sure to turn on the trident killer, and you will get yourself a bunch of resources like this one. So yeah, anyways guys, that is it for this one. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions about how this works or anything like that, feel free to leave them down below, and I'll try to answer your questions as quickly as possible. So anyways, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.